Hey everyone, Ariel Adams here with the Superlative Podcast. Listen to aBlogtoWatch's other podcast, aBlogtoWatch Weekly, where we chat about the latest watch news and reviews. Today on Superlative, my guest is Jared Silver. He's the president of SH Silver and Steven Silver Fine Jewelry. Jared, welcome.
Thanks for having me, Ariel.
So you're here on the West Coast. We're not in the same city in California, but we're part of the brotherhood of the West Coast of the United States, which is its own special fiefdom, right, in the world of luxury, its own special issues, its own special opportunities, its own special clientele. And you, I guess, were fortunate because you grew up in the world of jewelry. But I think the first thing I heard about when I heard about you, before I even met you, was you were the one responsible for bringing watches into the business. Is that true?
Well, it always takes a team effort, but I think I was maybe the catalyst that sort of caused us to go down that path.
So talk about that. You come from a background of selling, precious stones. Your father has very good taste in stones and knows how to talk about them and had made an excellent business out of that. And then I think that evolved into jewelry. I don't remember. I was told the story a while ago. And then at some point you started with watches. Talk about what was going through your mind. Why did that seem like a good opportunity? And what years did you do that?
So when I was growing up, my dad was in the jewelry and gemstone business. So his business was really focused around buying estate jewelry, often, rare, unusual pieces, vintage Cartier, Van Cleef, things similar to that.
Treasure hunting.
As well as, sort of treasure hunting is a great way of describing it. I always thought of my dad sort of like an Indiana Jones-esque character when I was a child. And over the years, when I was around him, he would, buy some unusual thing or be recutting an important colored diamond. And I grew up around that industry. And I could never really quite comprehend how, like when I was 10 years old, I loved cars. I've always loved cars and mechanical things. And so for me, I could never quite understand why this shiny rock that does virtually nothing could be like the same price as that new Ferrari or that new Lamborghini that came out. And so for me, in my child brain, I didn't understand how the scale of value somehow could balance between this car and this rock. And it wasn't until I was much older that I could really appreciate that. And we ended up getting into the watch business because I've always been obsessed with mechanical things, engines, cars, clocks, watches, ultimately. And when I was when my dad opened his first retail store, and this was in 2009, I think I was home visiting in like 2010, 2011. And I started asking him, well, what kind of data are you collecting on the store? You collect, how many people walk in? Are they men, women? What's the general age range? How many people are walking into the hotel, which is the Rosewood Hotel, where it was located? And he was like, oh, we're not collecting that data. And I was like, we should be. And you should, what's the average price point of what people are picking up and asking to look at? You should mark down the SKUs. So as we started collecting, I guess I was moonlighting. I ended up taking vacation from my real job, which was consulting at the time, to set up this program to collect the data at my father's retail store. And what was interesting is that the data showed that 80% of the people that were walking into the hotel where the store was located were men, but 80% of the people walking into the jewelry store were women. So it was
interesting.
They were really only capturing a very small part of the market. So I put together a business plan to expand the retail footprint, build out the brand of Steven Silver Fine Jewelry, and ultimately we needed more space if we were going to bring in watch partners and timepieces. And that's how we got into the watch business. So finalized that business plan in 2012. We were walking around with an iPad and a presentation through the halls of Geneva and Basel. And I was a young kid pitching some of these serious watch executives who had no idea who we were. And ultimately, we opened our doors in 2014. And I ultimately didn't join the business until 2018. I continued my career, but I was always very passionate. And I joined the board of the company in 2014 when we opened our doors. And then I've been involved since.
I remember those years. Thank you for sharing that. I'm curious. At that time when you were hunting for brands to put in the store, you as you said, you had to go to Switzerland. You basically have to go to them, right? At that time, some of them came to you, but when you're trying to grow a business from scratch, no one knows you, and you have to go to them, and you want to get the right brand. So you're there and you're meeting with some brands. And I want to ask you about what brands you eventually took at first, but also I'm curious, what was their response? Here you are, a couple of guys from California, very self-assured for good reason. They always, of course, love it when you come and kiss the ring. What was that experience like this first couple of years when you're trying to get it off the ground?
Well, one thing that most people don't realize, at least from the outside looking into the industry, is that the jewelry and gemstone and that wholesale side of the business and the watch industry are very different. They're
totally
almost
separate.
Completely separate industries in a way. There is a little bit of overlap between that Venn diagram, and it's usually in the sense that you have a brand like a Chopard or a Cartier or Hermes or something that has a watch division within the company. But they're very, very different. And my father's business was very focused on historically on the wholesale side of the business. So buying estates, recutting, manufacturing items, and then wholesaling them to often brands or other high-end retailers around the world, as well as dealers as well. And so we had actually wholesaled a tremendous amount of important stones to some of these bigger brands over the years. But it didn't make a difference on the side that even within these businesses like Cartier, like the watch division is very separate from the jewelry manufacturing and sourcing side of the businesses. So when we were walking around, no one who knew who we were at all. We were very much the new kids on the block, and it took some time. I mean, I think that the California, particularly Northern California and Silicon Valley, is a very unique marketplace. It's not a very flashy marketplace, but there's a tremendous amount of wealth in this area that's been generated over many decades of the tech industry creating businesses from nothing. And I think it's really hard to sort of crack the code on how to approach this market in a way that's different. And so at the time, especially, the big trend at the time was that every single retailer, especially that was working with large conglomerates like Richemont or LVMH or these types of groups, watch groups, they all wanted shop in shops. So every retail footprint, they didn't want you to sell online. They really wanted this in-store experience where you had this dedicated brand environment that was, same furniture, dedicated, space. And our approach was very different. We didn't want to create a shop that had a whole bunch of shop and shops inside. We wanted to create a very authentic Silicon Valley boutique experience. It was very different than what they were doing. And so some people just weren't interested and sort of laughed us out of the door. And we try not to let the door hit us on the way out. But then there was a lot of brands that found us very compelling. And so in particular, the independent brands are ones that resonated with us. And us, we are a manufacturer, so we understand the creative process. And we're not just a retailer that's buying at wholesale and reselling at retail. We're often manufacturing things from scratch, especially on the jewelry side. So we understand that creative process, and we really, as being a small family business, we really resonated with the brands where the entrepreneur was still at the brand. So it was nice to be able to look across the table and see, who's taking risks on their side as well.
I don't think most consumers appreciate the strange relationship that retailers have with the companies they sell. I think there's this idea that there's these established business models and you're like, oh, we sell things and you have things to sell. Let's work together. Like, I guess on a very basic level, that's true. But the reality is everybody wants to exploit someone else. To have sort of equal exploitation where you both make money and share in it is very difficult to find and establish. You don't necessarily know who that's going to be with, not only from a product standpoint, but also from a people standpoint. So it's this very strange, almost apprehensive and adversarial environment, even though at the end of the day, everybody wants to have a positive relationship and make money. So it's not a matter of just going there and being like, hey, we want to sell you. Can we make an order? It goes much deeper than that. What else would you sort of add to what I've said?
Well, it's interesting because I don't feel that the word adversarial. I think that there are retailers that find some of the brands that they work with adversarial, and perhaps being exploited that's a very strong word to use, Ariel. I would say that in the case of the brands that worked with us, we wanted to get into the watch business. We're a jewelry company first and a watch retailer second. And we ended up finding brands that we sort of needed each other in a way where they would benefit from our network in the community, the fact that we had this store, which, I feel was very beautiful, especially at the time. I felt it was a beautiful store and it was a great representation for any brand and it validated them. And they were now could plant a flag in the heart of Silicon Valley, right on Sand Hill Road. So to me, it was a mutually beneficial relationship. And then the other side of it is that we grew our brands together, if that makes sense. So as a retailer, we went from non-existing to all of a sudden we're a watch retailer. And a lot of the brands that we had, they validated our existence and we validated their existence. And a lot of people in the community, because they have a retailer that is invested in building a store, that is invested in representing the product, they trust that brand more because they know they have someone local that if they have an issue, they can take care of it. And for us, we have a very, very close personal relationship with most of our customers, which is a little different than I think just your average retailer. At least that's what I think really differentiates us in our community.
Now, you've been successful. Your new enterprise worked. You attracted enough watch brands, and you, of course, had some watch brands come and go, but you are very thoroughly one of California's premier places to buy luxury watches, especially some very, very high-end ones. For those relationships which have endured, where you have been their authorized retailer and they worked with you for the long term so far, what are some of the common themes? What do you think accounts for those successful long-term relationships?
I would say that the core of it is trust and expectations. So like going into a relationship with a clear expectation of what you expect from the other side and trusting that they're going to perform and doing your part in that good faith is absolutely critical. And when we're ramping up and you're working with a new brand, there's things that go wrong. I guess that's just, for us in Silicon Valley, startups are normal, right? So like you fund under this business plan and then all of a sudden you pivot and you switch verticals or you change your product because you weren't getting that product market fit and you pivot and you go and you pivot and you go and you pivot and you go. It's just standard sort of operating procedure. In the world of watches, especially as a consumer, you're often spending a lot of money on a product, right? It could be a beautiful watch, right? And it needs to work this way. But sometimes it's a first generation product, right? And there's an issue that happens and it has to be sent back to the factory. And for us, we're a specialty retailer. We're dealing with specialty brands, not brands that produce 100,000, 1 million plus units a year that are essentially like industrial production at that point, right? So one of my favorite stories is, I think it was 2015 or 16, and one of our brands was expanding their production. I said, well, how many watches are you going to produce this year? And they said, well, I would say probably between 75 and 85 watches this year. I said, oh, great. Well, what causes the number to be such a wide, that's a 15% variance or so. What causes that? And he goes, well, we don't know who's going to get sick. And
it's the watchmakers.
How many people are going to get sick and how long they're going to be out of the office for? So if it's a bad flu season that year, they might produce less. And it's like that human aspect of the business is, I think what I find so charming about it is that a lot of our collectors now, they like hearing that actually. And when they understand that, there's only 14 people in this company and they're all dedicated to making this beautiful mechanical object, and they don't even know how much their production is going to be because, it depends on if a couple people get sick, all of a sudden their production slows down, right? Like that's what makes a luxury product, a high-end artistic product unique. And I think that's really what gives heart and soul to this product category.
Quite recently, you opened up a new store in a building. The city is Menlo Park, California, of course. This is an interesting endeavor because people don't necessarily realize you're not just the store. You are now multiple stores, especially some brand boutiques. just on a very basic level, explain what the new property is and what's there.
So the new property is called the Villa Menlo Park. And the idea about the villa is that it's a place to discover the rare things in life. And a rare thing isn't necessarily just a rare watch or a rare piece of jewelry, but a rare thing can be, running into an old friend that you haven't seen for 5 or 6 years and just catching up over a coffee, or having that perfect martini in a specific way that you enjoy from, a bartender that just gets it. And so the building is really supposed to be a cultural epicenter for the community, which showcases great watches, obviously our jewelry pieces in certain parts of the building. But we also have food and beverage, and it's a community gathering space. And we have this beautiful plaza outside where we can have farmers markets and live music in the summer times. And we want to make this building really a center point a focal point for the community to come and gather and discover new things.
And these are always risky, right? This idea that you want to be a destination, that you want both customers and the community in general to come, it really is one of those, you first need to build it, then hopefully they'll come. And you talk to people in Switzerland. Exactly. You go to people in Switzerland, they're like, okay, tell me your guaranteed results for the next 5 years. You're like, people in America don't work that way. If we did, we wouldn't do anything. Like you guys don't do anything. So you said you have a dream. You think it could be successful. The people on your team, they think it could be successful. And you put your best shot into it. But that's how businesses are started in America. And we have a lot of people in Europe, for example, that listen to the show, and they always don't quite understand the American business mentality. I'm like, that's what it is. We don't know if it's going to succeed. We have a good instinct. We want it to succeed. We'd be a customer. I think you and your father and people in your circle, you all want to go to this place. You want to go to the villa. You want to go to the stores and hang out and see those things. You're making something which doesn't exist, but that you want to exist. Would you characterize it differently?
Well, I would certainly say that we have a vision and we want to bring it to a reality. I will say that there are a few people in Switzerland that do get it and do buy into the vision, and they do want to make it happen. And those guys are in the building with us. And brands like MB&F and H. Moser and Ulysses Nardin and Bubin and Zorwig, these brands are heavily invested in the success of the building. And for many of them, it's their first boutique in America. So they're choosing the villa, they're choosing Silicon Valley for a variety of reasons. The Silicon Valley is a very, very untapped market and a huge growth opportunity for these brands. We have an incredible dynamic akin to very little other places in the world. And it's sort of like Pittsburgh back in the age of the steel, right, in the Industrial Revolution. Like that was a centrifuge of wealth creation and innovation. And we have that here in Silicon Valley. And what's interesting about Silicon Valley is that what we don't have in the Bay Area in general is a place to gather right now because of the shifting dynamics in the Bay Area. So some shopping centers are very old school. They're the traditional drive-in, sort of 1950s style shopping center. And then you have the San Francisco city, which is going through a really tough time with crime, and a lot of people don't feel like they want to go shop for an expensive watch or even feel comfortable wearing a watch in San Francisco right now. And so they're
you're over an hour away. People need to realize that even though you're
45 minutes to an hour south. 45 minutes to an hour south of the city. So we're really close to Stanford University. So that's literally Stanford University is about 3 minutes that way from here. So we're right in the heart of it, next to Facebook, Apple, Google, all the usual suspects up here. And
those buyers are active. They may not they don't dress up, for success in public, but they are active buyers. They love, and they're competitive with one another, aren't they? They love outdoing one another.
For me, what I see is that there's been a lot more recent publicity around people in Silicon Valley wearing nice watches, and I think that it's a very competitive environment here. Like the businesses are competitive. It's very
don't let the hoodies fool you.
So yeah, right. I mean, this is formal attire in Silicon Valley right here. This is considered a suit and tie, but I think that there's a really strong collector community, and it's not just like trying to outdo one another. I think there's a deep appreciation for watches in the community in general. We're full of engineers, right? There's a lot of entrepreneurs, a lot of engineers, a lot of funders, a lot of founders, and what I see is that people are inspired by other people's, collection in a lot of ways. So because we have some people show up, they've never bought a new watch in their life. They're just straight vintage, right? But they come into a room and there's someone wearing a Group 4C and it's one of the early models or whatever it might be. And there's just a lot of it's a really dynamic culture here, actually.
So I'm going to lead into this more just because I like to explain some of the cultural differences between different parts of the United States. Because again, there's still a mentality, especially in parts of Europe, that we're sort of all the same. It's homogenized. In the East Coast, competitiveness amongst men often is how much money have you made? And it's very different on the West Coast. And if you're an engineer, the competitiveness is how good was the machine that you made? And a machine can be a software machine or a physical machine. And watches are machines. And so the same competitive mentality fits in of, I designed a really good machine. I bought a good machine. I afforded a really good machine. Can you afford as good a machine as me? So the competitiveness translates itself quite differently, even though at the end of the day, people are still buying expensive watches. But it changes what they buy, where they buy it, how they talk about it. And that has a big effect on how you speak to them, how you cater their needs. And so someone accustomed to selling watches in New York City, I don't think could do as good a job in Silicon Valley.
I would say that there's some truth to that for sure. I wouldn't disagree with you in that whole statement, but I would maybe caveat it in a few ways. What I find is that the technicality of a watch is very fascinating to my customers. So they're not really as motivated by the monetary side of it. Like there's some inexpensive watches that are technically interesting that are super desirable.
Absolutely.
And what the one thing that I will see is consistent across both, let's say the New York market and the Silicon Valley market, is access to rare and hard to get things is always interesting. So the fact that you can discover something new in one location, or you got access and you were able to get that hard to get piece, even if it's not the most expensive one or has the highest resale value, but it's just hard to get because there's not a lot of them out there, is definitely like a feather in a cap that
everyone likes exclusivity.
Yeah, everybody likes to get something that's hard to get. I think that's fair enough.
What phase are you at with the Villa? You formally opened. I know that there's a couple of stores open already. What's already been done? What's open now?
So we opened our offices last year in May timeframe, April, May, and we were working in a construction zone. So we relocated our office. We still had our old store, and at least we were in the building. And then I oversaw the construction from the building, and we had our official soft opening in January with MB&F. H. Moser was soft opened as well as our new Steven Silver boutique, which is currently doubling as a multi-brand watch store. In the future, our multi-brand watch will move into a different area of the Villa. And then we have our Boobin and Zorwig boutique as well. And as of now, Ulysses Nardin is about to open on March 18th.
Have you experimented at all with new, I'll call it retail concepts? The idea where people go into the store and they see something different, they do something different than maybe the way retailers have been in the past, because you have a lot of ability to control this and experiment, not just with the whole building and concept, but also the way people behave and what they see when they go into the retail. What have you done in a novel sense there?
Well, each one of these boutiques is co-designed with the brands. So the idea is that we want to showcase the best that the brand has to offer. So in some cases, it's sort of diving into the history, showcasing the technology that they've developed, and really giving a platform for these smaller brands to, or a bigger megaphone for them to speak through. We've installed these LED walls that allow for us to have a very dynamic environment downstairs. We have areas where we can set up different art exhibitions inside the space, so we can rotate things through to have interesting events and showcase different artists. And then upstairs, what we're planning on doing is we're actually building out a 4,500 square foot, what I'm calling the penthouse. And the penthouse, when you go upstairs and you go up the elevator, you'll step into a foyer. And if you step into this foyer, you're going to feel like you just stepped into someone's home. And the idea is that I don't care if you live in a $20 million mansion in Atherton or Woodside, or if you don't live in that kind of style. Either way, you park your car, you can come upstairs very easily, and you step out of the elevator and you think, damn, I wish I could live here. Either way, you feel comfortable and you feel at ease and you feel at home. And the idea of the penthouse is that we have our own space that we can host dinner parties, brand dinners, have cocktail hours. We can have a unusual chocolate tasting, whatever we need to do. We have basically a home-like environment. And this actually, it was inspired during COVID. So during COVID, the retail stores were shut down. Obviously, in Switzerland, they had very, very strict rules, and most factories were either operating at a quarter capacity because they weren't allowed to have so many people in, or they weren't producing at all, right? So it was a really bizarre and sort of scary time. And I actually remember when this was, because it was during the Blade Runner day in San Francisco when the fires were burning. So this was like September timeframe, and during the daytime there was this orange hue to the sky. It was one of the most bizarre experiences. And one of the brands, the person that ran the brand in North America, he happened to have both a Swiss and an American passport. So he was able to come to America. And so he said, hey, I have some prototypes of watches that haven't been released yet. Would you like me to come over and show some customers? And I said, well, let me get a couple of the guys together and we'll do a dinner. And all the restaurants were closed, but at this point, COVID was pretty clear what was going on here. And so I invited 8 of our good customers to come over to my father's house to have a dinner party. And I don't know if it was that, a lot of people maybe hadn't hung out yet or whatever it might have been. But everyone showed up with this great attitude. We're in my dad's home. We're sitting at the dining room table there. We had a chef come in and he caterer come in and he cooked in my dad's kitchen and served us this unbelievable meal. And everyone across the board said, this is the best experience I've ever had as a watch collector. And that really resonated with me, and it resonated with our brand partner as well. And when after the next day we got together, and I said, man, that was just a great event. He goes, yeah, 100%. He goes, I wish all of our events could be like that. And so by having the penthouse, we have our own little clubhouse, our own home connected to the building in a secure environment where we have complete control over what we want to do and how we want to showcase products. And as part of that, I built a pop-up area. So this pop-up area can be a place where, a brand like MB&F could come in, although MB&F has a space downstairs, but maybe another brand like Urwerk wants to do a retrospective, right? So they go all the way back to the very first one, and they bring in all their historical items, and they convert this 400 square foot space into a little Urwerk museum. Totally possible. Speaking of Urwerk, they're right behind me. So that could be a great use of that space. But the other thing that I can do is I can invite, I know a great shirt maker in Florence that makes these beautiful, handmade shirts, and he can come in, bring all the different swatches, and basically create a beautiful studio in this pop-up area, do made to measure, where you can select which fabrics you want. He takes all of your measurements, and then he goes back to Italy and he ships you your shirts, right? And he can take the pop-up space for a week or two or something like that. But either way, we can rotate new things in. And going back to that discovery point, the idea is that we want to constantly be bringing new and interesting things for people to discover, to learn about new products, new artwork, an unusual sartorial experience, whatever it might be. That's what the space is for.
That's really awesome. Thank you for sharing that. It goes into something that I've been talking about a lot lately, and I say that the watch hobby is a social first hobby these days, as opposed to a product first hobby these days for a lot of people. Not everyone, but for a lot of people. And what that translates into is that the ability for this hobby to not only make you friends, but help you maintain friendships, i.e. give you stuff to talk about and stuff to do, is not just nice, but actually crucial for a lot of people, meaning they would not be buying these products if it wasn't a vector towards friendship and maintaining those relationships. So what you're talking about, a dinner party where people get to come and have a good time, that's exactly the type of thing that people are looking for, more so than in a vacuum, I want to buy and wear this product without specifically having a place to wear it. If anything, it actually has to do with that issue where people don't necessarily go out as much anymore. And when they do, it's much more intentional. And the ability to have a group of people that care about your watch today is just as important as you liking it yourself, right?
Well, building on that. So one of my board members, who was formerly the president of our company and a great mentor of mine, his name is Andrew Block. He was part of the core team that built Tourneau back in the day. And when
Andrew's great.
And so when we first got into the watch business, he made it very clear. He said, Jared, people don't buy watches to tell time. And there's a lot of reasons why people do buy watches, but to tell time is almost one of the last ones. And when he was at Tourneau, they had gotten acquired. They had sold the company to a private equity firm. And they hired McKinsey to come in, and they did a customer analysis of why do people buy watches, right? And what was interesting that flushed out of that exercise that they went through is they asked people, when is the day that you most enjoy owning a watch? And a lot of people would think, oh, the day I buy it, or the day that, the day I bought it after that long hunt or waiting for it and getting that unobtainable piece, right? Or the day I gave it to my son, or the day I sold it, perhaps, who knows? But the most consistent answer of when a watch owner gets the most enjoyment from owning that watch is when you're sharing with someone else why you picked that watch. So when you're sharing that passion point with someone else. And so if you're, on a flight and you're wearing a watch and someone goes, gosh, is that an MB&F or is that a Moser or how about, what is that? Right? And you go, well, like this is the story about this watch. And that's why there's so many brands that, the story behind the watch is so great. And when you're sharing that passion and that story with someone else, it makes a world of difference in the enjoyment that you get from it.
In 1862, Franz Ludwig Loebner began his career making precision timekeepers in what would become Germany. Settling in Berlin, he received an official clockmaker's mandate from the king and quickly gravitated towards the then pioneering technology of creating precise instruments to measure short durations of time. In 1881, Loebner was already an exclusive mark thanks to their ability to mass-produce chronographs able to measure 1/100th of a second. Just a few years later, they developed a clock able to measure 1/1000th of a second for sports and scientific purposes. Loebner continued to be a recognized German leader in precise and reliable high-accuracy timekeeping into the 20th century. They were among the first to use highly precise electric switches to trigger their mechanical measuring devices in order to overcome the limitations of human response time. Loebner has now been revived for a modern era. The company continues its long legacy of creating precise and beautiful timing equipment for today's demanding users. The Loebner Steel Racer features a novel chronograph-focused dial with an eccentric reading of the time and a sliding crown guard system. The time-only Loebner Sledge model features a smaller 100-meter water-resistant case and a new inner rotating timing bezel system. Learn more about the history of precision timekeeping instruments and the new Loebner wristwatch collection at lbnr.com. So at SH Silver, who's in charge of that relationship with the consumer? I mean, it's like sort of a dedicated role. It's a form of marketing, but it's really a relationship. It's a community relationship manager. Do you have a dedicated person for that? How's that going to work? Because it seems like it's such a crucial part of the business right now is to get people there and then to have a good time while they're there.
Well, luckily I have a great team. So I have a lot of aspects. There's not a single contributor. It's definitely a group effort. And, for me, I have an incredible sales staff that's very well educated. They're very well informed, both on the watch and the jewelry side of the business. And I have a good marketing team, great PR team that's coming and putting together, like, we have to get this out into the world that this place exists. And the brands have been extremely helpful in that process as well. So we all have slightly different spheres of influence, and perhaps ours is more local when it comes to the retail side of the business. And then the brands obviously have a wider network that in following. So like just last night, we had an event with Moser. And we invited a bunch of our community, and we had a good RSVP turnout. And someone showed up because the person that runs Moser in North America, he posted to a Facebook group, a Moser fan group on Facebook, that there's this art exhibition, LeBerg. We had the LeBerg watches on display inside the card, in the cardboard, in the actual showcases with the real watches, out on the table so people could see them side by side, which was really interesting. And so he posted this, and someone who we had never done business with, that didn't really know who we were, saw that and ended up coming over. And I love seeing that. I love seeing someone that we've never met before show up at an event.
I've noticed that a lot of the stronger retailers around the world are considering how to add this type of element. They have a space sometimes. They sometimes actually want to charge people, like to have a club with a membership fee. But this idea that they need to be a social destination where they have to create these reasons to come outside of just the product is a popular trend. I think it's quite necessary. It's obviously an experimental phase right now, but Steven Silver is amongst those professional places around the world that knows this is a necessary element to it. So again, I think kudos to you for recognizing that. But again, I think it's also important to say there's so much to learn about that, right? It won't be until 4 or 5 years down the road of doing this that you start to realize some really strong lessons and best practices, maybe, right?
Of course, no one's really, there's certain brands that and retailers that have attempted this. Some have done it better than others. And
sure,
for me, what we're doing is different than what we've seen what others have done, and we hope that we can evolve and innovate on top of their forward-thinking progress that they made maybe a couple of years ago and do something new. And then I hope that someone sees what we do and they try to come up with an idea that takes what we built and does it better. And that's sort of the progress that we all try to go through. For me, though, it's really looking at the community first and understanding what does the community need where I am, rather than just take an idea that maybe it works in Singapore, maybe it works in Miami, and then see if it works here. For me, it's really focused on the customer first and understanding who is the customer in our area, what's going on in the dynamics from not a geopolitical, but a local political perspective, and then try to position ourselves to be a real value proposition for people beyond just a place that they can discover an unusual and rare watch. For us, it's also about the community. If you come and hang out here, who knows who you're going to bump into? And I love it when we have an event and one of my customers is over here and they're starting a new company, and my other customer is a VC, and they connect, and then all of a sudden he's the VC is investing, and that happens all the time in our business, or watching it happen in our environment.
It's a great thing, and it feels good, and it, of course, means that people get value out of these opportunities. I want to know more a little bit about the expectation from the brands. As you know, I carefully cover how brands and retailers interact, the business model between them, the relationships. And I'm curious, for those companies that have stores there, you mentioned some of them, Moser, Ulysse Nardin, Bubin and Zorweg, MB&F. What are their expectations of you? Obviously, they want to sell products, so that goes without saying. But more specifically, because you are a slightly new thing, what are their expectations? Where are they giving you a lot of leeway? I'm just wondering what your conversations with them are like and what they say to you. Jared, we need to see this stuff.
Well, for us, it's really a partnership. So it's not just like, here's some product, go sell it. I don't even think a basic retailer relationship is as simple as that. In this case, it's really, we are an extension of their team in a way. So we have a brand ambassador that's dedicated to that environment, who has gone and trained with the team and really, drinks the Kool-Aid, for lack of a better word, of their messaging. And so for us, we do that with each one of our brand partners. And these are long-term partnerships. And in many of cases, we've been working with these brands for 10 years now, 10 plus years. And we've grown together, and we've helped build their business, and they've helped build our business. And it's an incredible partnership that we have. And it is really based around trust and obviously performance. It has to be there. This is a performance game. It is a professional environment. And, just like any sports team or business, if you're not competitive, then you don't exist in the long term. But But in the short term, it's really around how do we keep our messaging consistent? How do we make sure the customer experience is what we want as Steven Silver and what the brand wants as a brand? And that's it's all about communication ultimately. There's no leader in any brand that we work with that I can't get on. If I need to speak to them, we're on a call within, at most 48 hours, depending on where we are in the world. And this is the last time that I had an urgent situation, I texted the owner of a brand and I said, "Hey, I need to talk to you. It's pretty urgent." He said, "I'm on safari with my family. Can I call you in 72 hours?" I said, "Yes, no problem." But he said, if it's urgent, I can get a call right now. I said, "I can wait 3 days." So, but like that level of communication, being fully transparent with them. So for me, it's important for me to let the brands know which customers are coming in, what does our wait list look like. A lot of these brands want to make sure that their production is realistic to the demand signals that they're getting from the market. So when we get an order on a wait list or we take a deposit down, that's a real indicator to a brand of this product is truly in demand or not. And here's the names, and they want to make sure that they don't have one person's name on 6 retailers' wait list. Otherwise, they might be producing 6 watches when it's really just one person, and he's just trying to get it from the quickest route possible. And that's an ongoing conversation all the time. So at this point, we wouldn't be at the point where we're opening boutiques with brands if we were questioning our compatibility as a partner. At this point, it's we trust each other's compatibility as a partner, and how can we continue to work together in a productive manner and deliver the best experience to the customers and build our brands together.
Thank you. I want to ask you about some of the things that you share with the brands. I imagine that often they ask you, "Jared, how do we make ourselves in demand with the people that live in your area? How do we make people know about us or like us, or what do they want to see from us?" How do you approach some of those answers when they're trying to understand what motivates the consumers in your area and how to make them familiar or desire these, sometimes strange, esoteric, often for better than worse, but not always, that are made quite far away?
That's an interesting question. I want to say that to be more successful in this area is to invest in the area. So if you're spending the time to come out, visit, meet people, clients love meeting someone from the brand. They love the idea of meeting someone, and if it is the founder of the brand, great, right? If it's the international head of sales, great. If it's even a sales rep, or a marketing staff, or if you bring a watchmaker out, that goes a long way. Like, people love meeting the watchmakers, and that's a real thing. Is that if you come out and you invest in that market, if you invest in the community, it usually gives back. Maybe not instantaneously, but there's a direct correlation between people making the effort to come out. And like, we had a fantastic event with Laurent Ferrier, and they brought one of their head watchmakers out, and they set up a camera in our store, which we connected to the TV with a camera above the work shop, and they had a microscope, so we could move the onto the microscope, and then you could zoom in and you could see how he was polishing and what it looked like before and what it looked like after, and people could come over and then they could practice polishing and see how difficult it was. And for someone to be able to interact with a watchmaker, and they're wearing the watch on the wrists, right? So they're wearing the Laurent Ferrier on the wrist, and they're staring at a watchmaker working on the same caliber that they have in their watch, and they're polishing it, and they realize how absolutely difficult it is. It adds to the appreciation of the product. And I think that's the thing that's most important in our industry, is to contextualize the craftsmanship. And if you can show, a picture goes 1,000 words, right? But if you can show someone how hard it is to do what they've invested in, the appreciation just grows that much more.
Now, I think one of the things that we've realized is that despite their ambitions, these brands can't spend and invest the amount they need to in all places all the time. And I think that what you do as a good retailer is you convince them, you guys don't have unlimited resources for human beings, invest in our area rather than this other city over here. Invest in us because we're a growth area and we're going to work with you for the long term. How do you convey some of those things? Because again, to get those relationships going, you're asking for resources they, of course, can't spend elsewhere because, again, these are not giant multinational corporations, even though they sometimes think they like to act that way.
I think, I mean, you've said it actually. I can't really add anything more than that, Ariel. You've sort of summed it up. If people are gonna take the effort to come out here, and we're not close to Switzerland. It's much easier to get to New York. That extra 3 hours time zone change is brutal. So if someone's going to make the effort to invest in this area, and that's before we bring a brand in. And we're very selective about bringing brands into our environment. And that, like, one of the key things for me is a lot of people like, hey, why don't you have this brand in your store yet? Like, I really like this brand, and they're doing a drop of a new watch and something along those lines. For me, I want to make sure that a brand is going to be here in 3, 5, 7+ years if I'm going to invest to build an inventory and also to take the risk of directing a customer to that brand. And that was we've unfortunately we had a few bad experiences where a brand came in and a customer bought an important and expensive watch and the brand went out of business. They couldn't get a service. There were no spare parts. And in that case, with that particular customer, we gave them a full credit back of the full price of what they paid for the watch, and they could use it on anything else in the store. And that was something that burned, and that was a $180,000 watch that we had to do that. So, but we wanted to stand by the customer because ultimately they trusted our judgment to have a watch purchased through our store. So it's how we had to stand behind the customer in that case because the brand disappeared. So that's a lesson learned that when we have, and by the way, we were under no obligation to do that, by the way. That was something that we did because of the relationship that we had with the customer, and they appreciated that. And so, I mean,
that's the right thing to do from a relationship perspective, but you don't hear that story as being common with Swiss brands. They're like, no, we're not going to do it. Better luck next time. You knew what you were getting into.
Oh, there's two sides of there's two sides of it because in some of these brands, right, especially newer brands, if they're coming up with a new technology or way to display time, it might malfunction. And the customers usually know on the front end that this is a very, very bleeding edge level technology. It's just if you're spending, 20, 25, 30 grand on something and it's not working properly, it can get extremely frustrating. And so that's also on us, by the way. There's certain customers that are okay with if they buy a watch and it is a very, there's a few brands that have actually sorted out a lot of their issues in the long run. But when they first came out, like back in 2014, when we first opened, they got frustrated. And you really got to stand behind the customer, and you have to be able to, especially when we can recommend a certain product to someone too, right? So there's certain customers that if they really are going to be that frustrated, you can suggest that they look in another direction.
This is actually a problem which I think is growing in severity, and I'll explain the context here, and I think you'll maybe be amused at sort of what's going on, even though you know it. So 10 years ago, 15 years ago, these newer brands that came out, the independents, if you will, by the time they showed up at like a show, like a Basel World or Watches of Wonders or whatever, they more or less had their businesses intact. They had inventory to sell. They had like money behind them a little bit. Like they were more or less established businesses. And yes, they had engineering challenges, production challenges, but the cards weren't stacked against them. Nowadays, over the last 5 years.
Some of them were at that show and they were on fumes and they didn't have any money in the bank and they needed to sell, and then they needed retailers to commit to buy products.
I'm being nice to them, Jared. I'm being nice because what I'm about to say is that now it's what you're saying. They're like fake it till you make it guys. They get enough money to have like a crude prototype and to show up at like the Beau Rivage three shows in a row. And they're basically begging. They're like, will someone fund the rest of this for us? Will someone fund the rest of this for us? And they'll take your money, and they have no intention on delivering because they don't know when they can, because they still need more money to even build these things. And so that's why I use the word exploitation, because they're sitting there begging for investor money when it looks like they're ready to sell a product from a brand that can stand behind them. And that is a serious issue. And us as media, as well as you as retailers, are being used as a platform for these guys' silent Kickstarter.
Yeah, it's sort of like a buy-side financing. So, like you as a customer are financing, pre-financing the business. And in some cases, like MB&F, like Max Booster, he is historically, he's very open. He's like I went to, I think it was the 8 original retailers, and I asked them for an upfront check off of a drawing, right? But he went to these established retailers with his track record of success. And Max is he's a poster child of entrepreneurship and brand integrity, especially in the independent watch world. There's the going to the customer side is that can be risky. I imagine, you say a Kickstarter. It's one thing when you go to someone and you're like, I want you here. You go to a retailer who's like, pretty honed in this business, and you say, this is what I'm doing. It's a risk. On the other side, you hope that doesn't happen to consumers, because as retailers, we should know better, or we should definitely know the risks going on the way in. But on a consumer side, if that happens, I hope that it truly is. I hope that they truly, understand that some of these startups, watch companies, might just be, going out of business at some point.
I mean, again, you're sort of hyper focused on your area of the business, and that makes sense. But I think what you've paid attention to is all these brands that they're asking for pre-orders, right? That's the term they like using now, pre-order. But that is exactly what we're talking about. They're asking the consumer to fund a production run prior to the production run even made. And where I think it's dangerous is that, at least with you as a retailer, it's shared risk and reward, right? You help give money down, but then you get something to sell and profit at the end of the day. All the consumer gets is the thing, if they're lucky.
Well, that's the Kickstarter model, isn't it? You're
right,
it's non-dilutive financing. And what do you get out of it? Early access to a watch. Sometimes it's less expensive than the regular run, at least on Kickstarter. But
that was the traditional mentality. But these days, you know what I'm talking about. Brands are really leaning on the consumers. Sometimes there's discounts.
It costs a lot of money to design a movement, a caliber. You have to, then you have to find a watch manufacturer that you can get in line. There's such demand now. Watchmakers are few and far between. It's expensive, and it's a huge investment to start a watch brand with a very, very low probability of success. So
you think it's okay for the consumers to subsidize that without getting a functioning product at the end of the day?
Well, no. Let me reframe this. I think that it's important that consumers understand what the risks are. So, like for me, if I'm a consumer, there's some very well-heeled watch collectors in our community here that show up and they prepaid for an order based upon either not seeing a prototype or just seeing a 3D printed model. And they enjoy supporting a watchmaker in that way. It's that patronage aspect of, this is an art form, this is a dying art form, you're an artist, and I want to support you. And in the way that some of the great masters of the Renaissance were supported by, wealthy art collectors or art patrons, whatever it might be.
But you underwrite that. You essentially are the guarantor. Maybe not on paper, but they trust you, which is why they do that.
Well, in the example that I won't be specific with the brand because I want to be respectful to everyone, but in this particular brand, it was a watchmaker who was starting his own brand, and he went directly to collectors that he knew through his previous experiences, because he's an experienced watchmaker, and he went to these different collectors and he said, here's my concept. He wrote it. He got feedback from them. They interacted, and then he said, I need a $40,000 deposit. And ultimately, many of these people agreed to do it. Some agreed not to do it and said, "I'd rather see a prototype because before I give you $40,000." Obviously, these are very wealthy collectors, so they have the capital that they can do something like that and take a risk. But for them, that's taking a risk, and they're hoping that this is a rare watch in the next Philippe Dufour, and that's their upside, I guess you could say. Now you can't get one of this watchmaker's watches if you wanted to. You have to really invest in developing a relationship with him. And so, yeah, I mean, I don't work with this watchmaker, by the way. I have a ton of respect for him and his brand, but I don't work with him. So I'm truly objective on this one. And that's how it works.
Yeah, and thank you for sharing that story. I mean, it again, that's how the cool stuff gets made for sure. But I also think that the industry may have overleaned on it, and there's a lot of people out there that don't know about the risk.
There's a lot of watch brands that, especially coming from 2021 through 22, with that huge boom with the M2 money supply going up and that big crypto boom that happened and everything, there was a lot of brands popping up, sort of like. One of my favorite colleagues, and he said, it's like mushrooms after the rain in the forest. They pop up all over the place. And so for us as a retailer, right, and for us having a brand in our store is a validating statement for that brand. And at this point, we are. When we first opened, I guess you could say the opposite was true, that us having some of these brands in our store was a validation for us. And as a retailer, that was a new retailer. But at this point, I think that we're established enough that a brand being in our store is a trust point that is built between a new brand and a consumer, because we're willing to back the brand. And so we have to stand behind it.
Thank you. We haven't actually given you a chance to mention all those brands that you are a retailer for, either in the multi-brand Steven Silver store or the brand boutiques. Can you just list out the watch brands that people can go to you to get, or your property to get?
Yeah, sure, no problem. So we have Arnold & Son, Angelus, Bulgari, Beauvais, Bell & Ross, Boubin & Zorwig as a boutique, the first one in North America. Cyrus, Gerard Charles, Grubel Forsey. Currently, we're under construction with the Grubel Forsey boutique. Haute Lance, H. Moser, as the first boutique in North America. Crayon, a great independent small watch brand on the newer side. Laurent Ferrier, Louis Erard. MB&F as the second boutique in North America after the Beverly Hills one. And we have Renaissance, Roger Dubuis, Speak Marin, Urwerk, and Ulysses Nardin, which will soon to be opened as their first boutique in North America.
That's an impressive list. I actually did not know it was that many brands right now. You've definitely taken on some new ones over the last few years, right?
We've taken on a couple new brands in the last few years. So I tried to be really. We each brand is like a child. It's its own relationship. I don't even have 21 friends, so I have 21 brands I have to maintain a relationship with, and some are obviously ones that we're both investing a lot more in the relationship than others. But it's, for us, we want to look at where the market is going. And what I find at the end of the day is that this business is not a logical business. No one needs this product. The use of a tool watch disappeared years and years and years ago. So now it's an art form, it's a hobby, it's an expression of your own style, of who you are, of what you appreciate. What someone who wears as a watch does say a lot about who they are and what they appreciate in life. So for us, each one of these brands has their unique story. We have to learn those stories. I want to give them their moment in the spotlight. I have to train my team. I have to become fluent in that myself. And I owe that to both the brand and my customers and myself in the process of doing this. And so for us, we are really selective, because at the end of the day, these brands there's people behind the brands. And I like to think that there's three sides to a successful brand. One is the product, the actual product itself. Is it beautiful? Is it compelling? Is it interesting? Does it resonate with what is in style or appreciated today? Two is how they promote and market themselves. So what is the promotion of that brand look like? How do they get the message out there? How do they work with us when we do an event? How do they work with us? What kind of content do they allow us to make together, or do they provide to us? How do they interact with the press, like yourself, and how do they get in front of consumers? And then the third one is the people. And so I can't tell you how many brands have a great product and really interesting marketing, but they only perform so well. And then they bring the right person in. It can be as simple as the personality of that person, and the brand takes off. And so
You're right.
If you only have one of those three things, you won't be successful. If you have two of those things, an interesting product and okay people, you might tread water and be around. But if you need all three to really be successful as a watch brand.
That's actually such a fantastic place to end, because such an important point. Those three factors, you have to have all of them. You can't just have one or two. Three P's. Okay.
Yeah. Product, promotion, and people.
Okay. You have to credit Jared with that one. Jared, before we end,
I think the 3 P's came from Andrew Block, actually. So you got to credit
it came from Andrew. You have to rebrand it for you. Rebrand it for you.
I got to give credit where credit's due.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Remind people where they can learn more about you and the retail environment on the internet.
Sure. So our website is shsilver.com, and you can find us at Steven Silver, STEPHEN Silver, like the metal, Steven Silver on Instagram.
This has been the Superlative Podcast interview with Jared Silver, president of SH Silver and Steven Silver Fine Jewelry. Jared, thank you so much.
Thank you.